How strong do you need to be to go to college for weightlifting? What are the biggest mistakes high school weightlifters make in their technique and programming? And is college weightlifting the solution to USA Weightlifting's biggest problem? In episode 44 of the Last Set, Best Set podcast, Coach Calvin and I interview Trent Crane. He's the coach at Lindenwood University Weightlifting, the most successful college weightlifting team in the country. With 3 back-to-back national championship wins, multiple Team USA lifters, and nearly 15 years of experience in the sport of weightlifting, just about any athlete or coach can learn something new from Coach Trent's first ever interview. Welcome back to the Last Set, Best Set podcast. I'm Coach Brian. I'm the owner of Big Ben Strength, and I'm here today with
Calvin Lackey. I'm current captain of Lindenwood University's Olympic weightlifting program. I'm National University Champion 2025 and a coach through Big Ben Strength. Today I have with me my coach, Trent Crane. So the head coach from Lindenwood University. We've got 3 national championships under him as head coach, a few more as an assistant. Thousands of athletes, lots of strength and conditioning experience. Anyways, I'll stop going on about him and let him talk a little bit about how he got into weightlifting, how he got into coaching, and what led him to Lindenwood.
Yeah, so I'm Trenton Crane, so I'm head coach for Lindenwood, like he just said. And my journey kind of through weightlifting is I always did weight room stuff with this general sports, in the high school and, middle school level, just very basic stuff kind of getting me there. But I actually came to Lindenwood because I was pursuing a degree in exercise science. And I followed a girl here, believe it or not. Yeah. So I came to this school and it was just kind of a timing thing where as soon as I came to this school, as they were starting up a weightlifting team, under the former head coach. And he taught one of my classes, and it was like advanced strength training principles or something. And I transferred in as like a sophomore or a junior, I think, through undergrad. And he wanted me to try out for the team. And it was kind of, it was at the very beginning stages of college weightlifting. And he was just kind of looking to fill a roster, honestly. And, I think I had enough athletic potential, and I had done cleans like a lot of high school athletes had done, and maybe casually some jerks, but, snatch was like a whole new thing. And this was 2011. So, we kind of tried out for the team and we were filling spots. So I kind of got thrown into the mix and fell in love with it, As far as my journey through head coach or to get to head coach of the team is through undergrad and right after undergrad, I was a grad assistant for the team, which just basically I was working for the school and getting my master's here while working for the team so I could get some money out of the deal just to be able to survive basically. But at the same time, I was dabbling in strength and conditioning, high school strength and conditioning, Division II athletics, a couple local schools, local high school, and then I did strength and conditioning at McKendree College when I left Lindenwood as an assistant coach. And fast forward to 2021, and 2020 actually the program shut down. It's kind of a COVID year, and a lot of the programs got cut. And then I basically interviewed to bring the team back in 2021, and that was kind of the start of where we're at now. So yeah, March of 2021 to now so I've been head coach here.
So you guys started the program back up in 2021. How long until you guys won a national championship?
So our first one was 23, 24, and 25 so we three-peated the last 3 years. So I guess it was 2 years. So our third wave of kids coming in was when we won a national championship for the first time.
One thing that a lot of people listening to this will be very curious to know, what do you look for in weightlifters that you want to have come onto the team? There's probably a lot of athletes that want to join Lindenwood, but what do you look for in athletes that you want to join Lindenwood?
I would say the biggest thing is I try to recruit character over talent 100% of the time. I'm kind of a philosophical, cerebral coach as to where like your mindset and your approach, your coachability and kind of realistically who you are like very important to me. I believe you can, if you take somebody that's already like a star-studded athlete, but if I can't teach that person anything from where they currently are, it's hard for you to get better. Sometimes people coming in like a blank canvas, like a blank slate, that have no good but also have no bad, attributes to their movement or their mindset, or big holes in their game. Is sometimes better than an athlete that has been in the sport for a couple years. And usually, if people have early success, they're kind of used to being top dog, or big fish in a small pond. But you kind of get to this level, and you're kind of medium-sized fish in a very big pond. Like there needs to be more growth for people to have once they kind of get to this level. So I mean, truthfully, it's mostly about personality. I mean, me and Calvin were talking this morning. It's kind of it's the big three. Like you either need to be strong, you need to be technical, or you need to have the right mindset. And I would say heavily skewed towards the mindset. You know what I mean? Because I think you can make somebody that has the right mindset and is coachable and is open to change and new ideas, a really good athlete, as long as they're able to be a sponge and just kind of absorb the knowledge that we try to preach and exuberate in the weight room.
Yeah, so many people ask me, what numbers do I have to hit? What do I have to snatch? What do I have to clean and jerk to go to Lindenwood? And I always try and put kind of what you just said into words in some weird way. I'm like, hey, like, we just don't. He's not really looking for like, you to snatch 120 and then you can come to Lindenwood. It's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah, I'm looking for the people that have the potential to get to 120. Like there's no like a written rule of like trying to assess like people's approach or like mentality, because I don't know, trying to find the right weightlifter in my program is difficult, because when you're on your first date, you're always putting your best foot forward. You're always looking good, you're always on your best behavior. But as you get to know people, you start seeing people's true colors. And I really try to find who people really are over what their numbers are. I mean, it's kind of a joke on the team that I'm actually colorblind to a point. So a lot of the times when, you're across the weight room and I'm kind of looking at the movements that you're doing, I can't really see the colors that are on the bar. That's either 100 or 120 kind of thing. So it's more of of an approach that I want you to be the best mover and the best approach to weightlifting versus just the colors on the bar.
So when it comes to character traits that you're looking for with athletes, it sounds like a big one for you is coachability and just a rate of learning. Can you learn fast? Can you soak things up? What are some of the character traits that you really look for or like to have in an athlete who's thinking about joining the team?
Well, I wouldn't say that it would be necessarily learning things fast, but it's the willingness to learn. Everybody has holes in their game. The best weightlifters in the world have holes in their game that they're working on. So you can say the same thing 1,000 different ways to try to get an athlete to like get them to kind of click in their head as to what you're trying to get them to do. But none of that matters if they're not willing to change, or try something new. What's the worst that can happen? You miss, or it's such lightweight it's not going to be a pretty rep. But that's why they call it practice, because you're practicing and refining what you do. And I think it's important for people to realize that you are practicing to be a better you tomorrow, not necessarily the best you right now. So that's kind of that character, and change is a constant. So realizing that there's always going to be changes being made for you to become the best you is how you get better. Resistance to change and mindset, technique, all that stuff is kind of the killer of all progress, I think.
That's such a great point. I've never heard anybody actually put it quite that way, but like resistance to change absolutely kills a ton of people's weightlifting career. That's dang. That actually
Brian's right now.
Shattered his glass.
Taking a quick break from the episode to let you know about the OlyStrong team. The OlyStrong team is my online group coaching option for lifters who are looking to improve their technique, get strong, and set PRs. It includes your choice of 3 or 5 days a week of workouts, daily video feedback, and unlimited coach messaging to ask as many questions as you'd like for less than $1 a day. If you're ready to get started, then click the link in the description below for a free week trial today. All right, back to the show.
Okay, all right. So we have this question. This was probably the most common question when it comes to college weightlifting. And so Maddie submitted this one. How does somebody get a spot on a college weightlifting team? Like, what does the actual process look like? I think a lot of people think that they'll just post up that they snatched 120 that day, and then that they're going to get college recruits, DMing them on Instagram, sending them mail, whatever it is. And I think that they're probably shocked to find out that that is not the case. What does the actual process look like for a collegiate scholarship weightlifting team?
On the social media world, everything is social media driven. A lot of my recruiting does come from social media because truthfully, that's where the recruits are. That's where they reach out. But if you could see how many videos that people just tag us in or will just, send us a reel of them lifting kind of thing, like kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, I'm not really interested in what the numbers that you have on the bar. Like I'm looking for people that are legitimately interested in getting better at weightlifting and also getting a college education in the process. There's a big brother system. I know a lot of coaches in the industry. Coaches will reach out to me, but if you don't have a coach that is, well known in the weightlifting world, like that's fine too. But like reach out to me and like genuinely show interest and ask questions as to find out like if the school is right for you or if our program is the right for you. Like rarely am I going to respond to anybody that just like tags me in them clean and jerking, 135. Like there's got to be a little bit more of like, okay, yeah, that's a great lift, but it also like, what are you looking for? Why should I watch this kind of thing? So I think the biggest thing is just find a way to reach out and talk to me and kind of connect with me versus just showing me how good you are at the lifts. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, it turns out tagging people in an Instagram post with no context is probably not going to get the attention that you're wanting. It probably is just more helpful to just shoot them a message and ask, "Hey, how do I join the weightlifting team?"
Yeah.
That's probably going to get you pretty far. So then if somebody is a pretty good lifter, they seem like they're a good culture fit, or a character fit for you guys' team. What happens next? What happens after that?
Well, the biggest thing is I'm kind of a face-to-face person, so like I always like to do some kind of video call. I like to do some kind of Zoom or at very least a phone call. Obviously like a visit is always, in line down the road because I think it's important for people to see me and be with me in the weight room as well as my team because they can really decide if it's kind of the good fit for them. Every coach and every program is a little bit different and coaches are biased because it's obviously their program as far as what is the best program. But the question I think I want athletes to ask themselves that are interested in college is what is the best program for them. And when I say program, I don't mean like programming snatch and clean and jerk. I mean like the characteristics of the program. What is the culture, what do they preach and believe in that's going to make them the best athlete they can be.
Also, very importantly, does this school offer the degree you're looking for?
Yeah.
Academic side of things. How much does this school cost, even outside of scholarship and stuff? Because a lot of people do have an impression that they'll maybe receive an extremely large scholarship. But looking at just the total cost of that school can tell you a lot about how much it's probably going to end up costing you. Um, because scholarships are a limited pool. There's very few people that are top dog and are gonna get that full ride or get that kind of top level of things. I think that's something we didn't really include on this questionnaire here, but that's something I want to bring up is what kind of financial support can someone expect? Where is it coming from? What kinds of scholarships exist within the team?
So the easiest way to like answer that question is you as a school you kind of have this pot of money, okay? And of course we got to do fundraising cuz every school kind of does cuz we always want those additional add-ons, gear, bars, that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, um everything comes from this money bin that we have. So the bigger my team is, the more my team costs, or the more scholarships I give, the more money that is pulled from that. So we might have to fundraise more. So it's put into different buckets or avenues, but it still all comes from the same like collective budget that I get every year. Travel, memberships, bars, plates, chalk, tape, all those little things. Um, if a meet is in California, it's going to cost us a lot more money than it is if it's in Indiana. It's going to be like, are we going to fly? Or are we going to take a bus? So when we're talking about scholarships, there there's an average that I have to hit as far as where they want me to stay within. So basically, the average per athlete coming in stays the same no matter how many I bring in. So a percentage of tuition and room and board is what my average number has to be per year. So if I give Calvin $0 for coming to my team, but I give you, Brian, 5,000, my average is 2,500. I have to maintain a percentage of what tuition, room, and board is. So it's kind of a balancing equation as far as when I get one more to come to my team, as long as my average stays under a certain number, I'm able to do that. But I still have to show that the money I'm giving out, I'm still able to get to meets and pay for memberships and all that kind of stuff. Because again, it still comes from the same bag of money. Um, Bigger team, more competitions, international travel, all that still has to come from the same pot. So I can't just have 200 kids on my team because I can't support that many. You know what I mean? So it all comes from the same bank account basically.
So are we seeing basically like one partial scholarship, and that's one kind of rate that most people are getting, or are we seeing like a partial rate, maybe a little bit more of a scholarship for some athletes and a little bit less for other athletes, and then there's the full ride, or what does that look like?
It's the bell curve kind of thing. The majority, if this is like the median, a little bit over here and a little bit over here. Um, there are always some people that, not for any reason more than I believe in kind of their approach, but every every year we probably bring, 2, 3, 4 walk-ons on. And the biggest thing is because they may not have a lot of experience in weightlifting, but I think there's something that they can be produced to be a good weightlifter. So just because, I mean, you may not get as much kind of thing, but it's also a fluid concept every year. Where if you're able to get in and show a lot of progress and get good numbers and be good for the team and the culture, that can always change every year too. So it's not like if you don't have a lot of experience that you're doomed or anything. It's rarely is somebody going to get a full ride, but it's usually somewhere in the bell curve in the middle ground, a little bit more, a little bit less.
And I will say too, when we say full ride, what some people hear is I pay zero. That is not what a full ride actually
Yeah.
means. What a full ride is your tuition being covered fully.
Yeah.
Then, as an athlete at Lindenwood specifically, and many other schools, if you're an athlete there, you have to pay room and board to that school, which at Lindenwood is around 13,000,
Yeah.
12,000.
Depending on there's like different room
Yeah.
options, but it's about 13.
So that's something to consider, is that even if you get a full ride, you're still going to have to pay to go to school. School is very, I mean, we aren't, Power 5 football. We're not, giving you an apartment and a car for free
Or a Rolex. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's always going to be some cost for every athlete that comes on the team. It costs a certain amount. It's going to be less or more for certain people, right? Some people are going to be paying a lot more. I will say the number one thing you can do to pay less money for college is have a really good GPA,
Academics,
and a really good SAT, ACT standardized test score.
And people forget about that. Like I think that a lot of people think that they can get away with going to college having been a good weightlifter, but they forget that it's like you are a student athlete, and student is the first part of that equation.
Yeah, and academics and athletic is separate. as it is a lot of schools. And I have no control over academics. If you're a top model kid and you have really good SAT, ACT, and GPA, you're going to get a lot of money just based on those numbers alone that I have no control over. So if you've already covered a lot of that ground with your academics, it's easier for me to make up more versus if you don't get anything for academics. Now I have this big thing to cover, and
Right. Oh, that is actually a really great point.
so we can't really cover a lot of people like that, because then there's a lot more money that we have to cover that comes out of our budget now.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you guys are listening and you're a high school weightlifter and you want to be a college weightlifter, you should probably be also a really good student, so that your college is more likely to be able to cover more for you rather than hoping that your athletics will pay the bills for you. Let's go ahead and take a little bit of a left turn here. I'm curious to know about this, and Calvin, you'll probably have some good insight here too. What are athletes most often surprised by once they join the team?
You want to go first?
Sure, I'll say well, kind of two parts to that. One, uh getting to this level is a whole new level. And I think that what people don't know and what they're most often surprised about is everybody at this level wants to work hard in the weight room, wants to, push and wants to hit good numbers, and, wants to try to raise their minimums to where they can really consistently hit 90% of an 85. But what people don't think about is who they are outside of the weight room. Who who you decide to be, you have to learn to live like a weightlifter if you're going to make it to that upper echelon of what weightlifting is. You can't come in and just work hard, but then at night go to bed at 3 a.m. and only drink soda pop and forget to take your creatine and not take your whatever protein, after your workout or in the morning, and then you wake up and you forget to eat breakfast, but you're going to grab Starbucks and a coffee and then go to class and forget to eat before practice. Like, your sleep and what you eat and your hydration and who you live and who you become outside of the weight room sets good athletes aside from great athletes. And I think that's the biggest surprise that people see when they get here, in my
That
opinion.
that that makes sense, Calvin. We've talked about that as we call that the other 23 hours. If you're everybody at that level is training hard. That's kind of like that's not that's not a new thing for anybody there. But the ones that are training hard and sleeping really aggressively and recovering hard and staying on top of their nutrition, being proactive with their schedule and managing their stress is really going to make a big difference for a lot of people.
Yeah, man,
Calvin, what's your insight on that?
I think a lot of people think they get to Lindenwood or get to a college program, and they think that by getting there, they've made it and they don't have to do any work, or that the system will take care of them and that they'll be good just because they're on the best team. When that is not the case at all, you probably have to work even harder once you get here. Yeah, like I'd say that's a lot of kids' impression is, oh, well, this system works really well for a lot of athletes. So if I'm part of it, if I just show up, I'll get better. And it's not the case at all. And very much so, I think this about school in general, about the university setting, but also about athletics and college weightlifting, is that college is about access to resources. Nobody's walking your hand with you to go to class. Nobody's forcing you to go to bed early. Um, we're giving you the knowledge on how to be a good athlete and how to, whatever your degree might be. If it's in exercise science, that ties in, right? Like, so that's my degree. That was Trent's degree. Um, if you go to class and ask really good questions to your exercise science professors, you're going to be a better athlete. If you go to the athletic trainer when you're injured, you're going to be a healthier athlete. If you go to the sports dietitian on staff and ask questions about nutrition, you're going to be a better athlete. But nobody is forcing you to do any of these things.
Yeah.
Nobody's holding your hand, making you do those things. You have access to all the resources you need to get better. it's about if you're going to ask those questions. You know, are you going to come into practice and just, you know, meander through the workout and then leave an hour before everyone else? Or are you going to, you don't even have to stay late. Are you just going to go up to coach and ask him a question about something? Are you going to say, hey, you know, we have 30 athletes and maybe one coach in the building at some times, you know, oh, like I'm going to go up to him and ask him to look at my lift. Ask him to, you know, say, what do you think about this snatch? Like, am I moving good today? You know, coach isn't going to see every lift you do. So sometimes you have to reach out for those things. You have to try really hard. So that, I mean, that's kind of like multiple concepts there. On what athletes are surprised by when they get to Lindenwood, I think most often.
I think that kind of can be broken down into two aspects there, right? First is the idea that college weightlifting is probably the only or last time that this will ever be available to you as an athlete. But basically anything you want is there if you want it. But you have to be willing to go and get it. Like where else in your life can you go and talk to experts in strength and conditioning, experts in exercise science, and get all of the info that you could possibly ever want from like the best in the world at it? Not readily available to you outside of college. Same in a professional weightlifting setting like you guys have. Like where can you go and get the best eyes on your lifts? Where can you go and surround yourself with like really good other athletes who are going to push you? It's there if you want it. But then the other aspect that I think that you guys hit on is the idea that like this is uh you are probably coming from being the best weightlifter on your team, especially if you're coming from high school. You're probably coming from being the best weightlifter on your team now to joining a collegiate team where everybody was the best lifter on their team, and now you are in a group of people who are all in that. You know, you're the small fish again, right? And so people think that a lot of the time when they join a high performing team, that just because they are on the team, it will make them better. And I think that that's a common expectation of high performing teams. But the reason that high performing teams, in my opinion, are high performing is because the people that are on the team are actively working to be better and to push the people around them to be better. And so if you're on the team and you're not actually doing that, you're there, but you're not participating. You're not actually part of the high performance. You're probably dragging people down with you.
Yeah, and I like you guys both hit on some really good things. Like it's an opportunity for you to become whatever you want to become. And if somebody is just fine with just making the team and cruising kind of thing, then you're not adding to our team culture of continuing success to be the best. You know, I've had people that will say, I won't name names or anything, but some people might say, oh, you know, my shoulder's been hurting for the past 2 weeks kind of thing. Well, we have full access to a full athletic training staff. And then usually my next one is like, well, have you followed up with your athletic trainer so they can give you and assess you and then report to me as to what they find? 9 times out of 10, their answer is no. So then it's kind of like, I don't want to enable people, then I just kind of want to say, then that's probably what you should do. Like, nobody is going to magically be able to tell that you're having shoulder issues unless you reach out for help and say, I've seen the trainer, they've assessed me. This is what they found. This is what they want us doing forward. And then me and the athletic trainer can get together and work on a plan to get you back right. That also shows me a little bit about who you are, and you're being proactive about your things versus just waiting to the point that your shoulder is falling off to then go, I'm in trouble. What do I need to do? There's all these avenues that you can utilize when you're at a college or you're at, you know, a high level program like us, but it's on you to reach out and get as much out of it as you can.
And that's kind of also just a part of becoming an adult too. Like you're also joining a program as you're becoming an adult, so you kind of realize that like, oh, if you want something, you kind of have to go do it yourself. Like that's it. And so that doesn't mean that you have to assess your own shoulder, but that means that you have to go and reach out to the person who's going to help you do it. And you have to talk to your coach and get them to make sure that they're connecting on their communication and everything, right? Like that's kind of it. Like you're also learning to be an adult at the same time as you're learning to be a professional lifter too.
My 12-week weightlifting program is available in the description of this video. I put a lot of time into this 12-week program. And we also have a new 12-week volume cycle, perfect for this summertime. Get you kind of jacked, as well as building a ton of work capacity for those Olympic lifts. A volume program like this is what most people are missing in their training. 12 weeks, going through 10s, 8s, and 6s in the strength movements. 3, 2, 1 in the Olympic lifts. It's going to get you set up for a really great school year of lifting if you're in high school. Or if you're just a beginner lifter, this is going to set up your weightlifting career for a lot of success in the future. Be sure to go check both of those programs out down in the description below. Thanks.
So next kind of main theme that I want to get into here is on programming, and this is partially because I started having Calvin coach me as an athlete, and Calvin's whole history as a coach comes from basically your coaching. So I found a ton of different things in there that I was totally not used to, and really I'm coming around to the idea that I think you guys might have some of the best programming in collegiate weightlifting. Maybe that's my statement. That's not your guys' statement. You don't have to say that, but I think that you guys seem to be doing something different and better than anybody else that I've seen. So I'm kind of curious. First, how do you approach programming for a team with athletes that come from so many different backgrounds? Like you guys are having maybe less experienced freshmen join the team at the same time that you've got Ella Nicholson, a junior world champion, joining the team. Like, how do you approach programming for that? Like, is it team and then individualized?
So I would say, um, I'm not really a believer in one size fits all when it comes to programming. We all just kind of stand on the shoulders of giants who have figured stuff out way before us. We're not really reinventing the wheel here. It's not rocket science. We're weightlifters kind of thing. Now, taking that a step further, there is a little bit of a learning curve when it involves people getting to my program, because what I write for Cal, is not gonna be the best that is going to work for, like you, Brian, or somebody else on my team. There's a learning curve of me kind of learning who you are and like your big weaknesses. I'm a big fan of weakness training. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So I think what I've seen in the weightlifting world is, if you're somebody that isn't good at below knee block power snatch, people try to avoid the below knee block power snatch because it's not as impressive and they don't look as good. But what that might be doing is it might be shining some light on a hole in your game as to why we need to work that area. Now, not everything, there are certain movements that aren't as directly tied to your snatch and clean and jerk, but it might be telling you something if you are really good in these areas and you're really bad in these other areas. So we need to get the bad to catch up to the good so that you're kind of ready for the next stage. Um Even, I mean, high level athletes, beginner athletes, intermediate athletes, like I said kind of earlier, everybody has something that they are working on, because everybody in the sport is trying to continue their success. So if you just start avoiding the things you suck at, you're not going to keep showing the same success. So when it comes down to like the nuts and bolts of it, as far as sets and reps and phases, we have a general team phase that we're in, because typically most of our athletes are trying to be the best that they can be around university nationals time. International athletes, Grace Montgomery is one of our current athletes that just went to junior Pan Ams and junior worlds. She's on a little bit different of a trajectory, because those meets are a little bit more important for her career as a weightlifter than university national is. So she might be in a different phase than people that are just trying to be the best at university nationals. But usually the people that are the best at university nationals went through the same general phase that she is now in. So she's at a different time of the macro cycle, but also how I get her to be her best her is vastly different from anybody else. You know, one of my sayings is, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. learning on how to get them, whatever block of training I'm trying to emphasize, volume, tempo, strength, blocks, power production, jump height, isn't gonna, whatever I'm trying to emphasize during that session or that block is not gonna look the same for every athlete. And that's the part that takes a little bit to kind of dive into and kind of understand. Um, it's not a one size fits all by any means. The longer you're with me, the more knowledge and focus and targeted program to you that you will have. Um, I'm also kind of a fan of, again, that programs are not the end all be all, but I think I have a much different approach and philosophy to weightlifting than a lot of other coaches do. Once you've been with me, you kind of learn to like do a systems check of like, where am I at in the macro cycle? What's my priority and why am I doing this movement? And you learn to assess as to where you need to be at, because my best athletes, I've talked to Cal about this a little bit, but I should be able to put snatch variation, clean and jerk, and back squat. No sets, no reps, no percentages. But my goal is for you to then to be, okay, I'm 22 weeks out of a competition. The biggest thing coach keeps telling me is I need more acceleration coming off the floor and my front rack position sucks. So these are probably the things and where I need to be at, because that's how my movements are telling me where I need to be at. And from there, we can kind of evolve that day as to what we need to work on. I I don't believe in programs that say I need to squat 5x5 80%. But if you're only at 65% and you're falling apart and you look like garbage, we're not going to just blindly go to 80%. Or if you just had a late night staying up studying for a test and you come in, you're like, I am dog water. There is no ways I can do that many sets or reps or percentages. First off, I'm going to probably say, let's try and see how you look. Because everybody has those days where they come in, they're like, I'm going to have a terrible day. And you wind up having one of the best days of your life. But if you get to that point and your body is not allowing you to do what the program says, I am the furthest from the coach that says the program says this, you have to do this.
Right.
Because
It's just pointless.
it is. I mean, we're not machines, we're organisms. Like if there's too much stress that we can't handle, there's no reason to just blindly push towards that because that's the plan. So there's a lot of push and pull within the weight room. And I say this a lot too, but to be able to go up and do heavier weight, like, you have to earn it. Like, there's something about weightlifting that if you're not ready for it, it won't allow you to do it. And the worst thing you can do is just like beat your head against the wall because you want to snatch 100. If you're not snatching 100, there's probably more stuff we need to work way back here that's going to get you to 100 the right way. And I think those are the things that I preach differently than some other coaches that may not have the experience that I have.
What are some things that you think you've noticed seem different about Trent's approach to programming compared to what other people are doing?
Yeah, RPE is a big one. We use a technical model of RPE that really has to do with how many aspects of your movement are breaking down as a result of adding more weight. And typically, RPE 7 is usually the lightest week of the programming. And that looks like kind of the heaviest weight you can do without anything breaking down. RPE 8's one thing breaking down. RPE 9 is two or more things breaking down. You probably can't add much more weight after an RPE 9 set as well. That's one aspect that I don't think I've seen anywhere else. Um, most people do percentage work for snatch and clean and jerk and back squats. It's very common to see powerlifters do RPE for their main movements, but they use more of an RIR kind of RPE scale where RPE 8 is 2 reps in the tank and RPE 9 is 1 rep in the tank. So it's not quite the same. Honestly, I'd say like a big focus at Lindenwood. Most other coaches are businesses. Most other coaches do not have the luxury of getting a kid for 4 years where they can develop them long term. They want to get wins for that kid right now. They're a lot, maybe, in general terms, a little more short-sighted about the goals of that kid. We see this in youth and junior athletes quite a bit, and that is one big thing. The long-term perspective, setting you up to be a really good weightlifter after your Lindenwood years, not just during them. And that does reflect in the programming. You might Trent might receive criticism from other coaches for not having us do total days year round, or even more than just a couple months out of the year. Where, in my opinion, that is the best way to get you the best at snatch and clean and jerk in that short term. But is it the best 3 years down the line? Maybe if you put more focus into your accessories, during that phase, into your strength movements during that phase, you might be better off in the future. So that's a big way I see our programming differ from, the handful of other programs and coaching philosophies that I've been exposed to.
I think, and I literally just wrote down a lot of kind of what he said, but like, I, my best weightlifters, it's the long-term perspective. And I think a lot of coaches try to get back to snatch and clean and jerk singles as fast as possible because they're wanting more chances to arrive at a top number. So in 6 weeks, if I can get you to singles faster, you're going to have more chance to then improve those singles. My perspective is the polar opposite of that. My perspective is I'm big on foundation, and I think a lot of people come in and even high level athletes forget the base layer of foundation. As to the stronger your foundation is, the taller your pyramid can be. That's very hard for people that I deal with in the age ranges because it's not pretty. It's not flashy to be able to put, like, I'm doing a base week RP 6 4 snatches and it's only at 65%. Like, that's not cool to show, or it's not like necessarily what people want to see out of weightlifters. But you're laying a foundation for the potential for then that number to be higher when you finally do get back to singles. Um, One of my teammates taught me this, like, kind of a adage or like approach is about like harvesting the crop too early. So if you ever did like a elementary school experiment and you buried a seed for it to grow into a plant, if you keep digging up that seed and looking at the seed and going, is it growing roots? It's never going to grow roots. But you got to leave it in the ground and let it kind of grow roots and expand and grow into a plant before you decide to pull up the seed and see what you got. If you're always ripping up that plant, it's never going to keep growing. And those lifters that I've seen usually always hit the same numbers. It's cool, but when you go to competition for 3 years and you've done the exact same jumps, plus or minus maybe 5 to 6 kilos, it's probably because you're harvesting the seed too much. You gotta wait for it to be ready to be harvested, and that's what I think about doing like total days. We don't do, and what I mean by total days is, old school weightlifters follow like the big Friday model. Friday, we're going to snatch and clean and jerk singles and see what we got. We're going to do that year around because the more times we come back to it, the more chances we have to then arrive at a new number. And I hate that you just want to magically get there versus taking a long-term perspective, zoom out a little bit. Instead of zooming in, zoom out and look big picture as to what is going to set you up for being the best you when the time is right. I don't care what you snatch and clean and jerk singles when you're 6 months out of competition. If you're snatching, clean and jerking singles 6 months out of competition, hitting PRs, you're harvesting too early. Keep it, dig under the ground and let it grow and see what it can become when it matters on stage for a qualifier for a big meet versus just what you do in the training hall. Nobody cares what you do in the training hall. You can hit PRs left and right in the training hall, but when you get on stage, if you just crap the bed, you're prepping wrong. And I think a lot of people really take the approach as they just want to snatch and clean and jerk because that's the sport. But they don't they don't zoom out. They don't see big picture. And that's kind of my problem doing total days constantly.
I think that that also sets an expectation for athletes when we're going heavy every week. We set the expectation that is the rate of progress you should expect. You should expect to see, because I'm having you test every week. It probably means that I want you to get better every week, right? But I think that that sets an improper expectation of how long it takes to actually get good and build a base to lead to longer results. Where, like you were saying, nobody wants to post their set of four snatch at RPE 6, but everybody wants to see the heavy single. Well, one's going to lead to something else. You know, the heavy set of four is going to lead to a much, especially if you kind of like. I really like to do this with athletes sometimes, where I'll say like, okay, we're gonna be starting this block with triples for 4 weeks, and then we're gonna do doubles for 4 weeks and singles for 4 weeks. Right now, your triple max is, we'll call it 30 kilos off of your single max, whatever it is. If we can get that triple max to be 15 kilos off of your single max, that probably means that your single max is going to go up. But then if we
Yeah.
compound that into the next phase where we say your double max is only 10 kilos off of your single, well, what if we can get your double max to match your current single without retesting your single? Well, then when we go to retest, you might actually have a whole lot more in the tank rather than like, yeah, you could, if you just push singles of the week, you might get away with a 1 kilo PR. That's cool. But what if you take a step back and have a longer approach? You might not only get away with that 1 kilo PR, but you might also be able to stack up 5 and 10 and 15 kilos at the end of that cycle.
Yeah, one thing I think weightlifting, a lot of the times, especially when you're looking for programming advice, it's kind of clouded by the high performance level, by the people at the very tip top of the sport and what kind of programs they run and how they organize their training. Because, yeah, when you're competing internationally 4 times a year, your program probably has to prioritize heavy singles more than somebody who doesn't do that. Somebody who is 5 years out, if that, of competing internationally ever. And so I think when you ask high level coaches, a lot of the times, about their opinions on programming, they're skewed a little bit by what works for their top level athletes, and what keeps them in good shape for competing year round, as opposed to potentially what got that athlete to that level, which some coaches will say, this training method, Big Friday, year round is what got them here. Um, but Big Friday, yeah, I think that's the expression of the strength gains. It's not the method of getting them in that way. So that's what I wanted to add to that.
Yeah, and I think the ones that are able to follow that model usually have a really good long base foundation that have gotten them there. And just because, like I said, the model is Big Friday doesn't necessarily mean that you max out snatch and clean and jerk on the Big Friday and try to hit new PRs. You have, take the harvest seed analogy, you set everything up for that week to see what you can do on that Friday and not get frustrated or mad when it doesn't go right, but you've done everything you could based on the parameters of what your season looks like. And then Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is all to set you up best again for that next Friday. Problem with this model is you have to be very in tune with yourself to do this model, because just because it's the Big Friday model does not mean you're going to hit PRs every Friday. It is, you're going to be real with yourself, and honestly, you're even a higher level athlete because you're real with yourself and you understand that not every snatch and clean and jerk total day is going to be the best day of my life. And you're okay with that because, again, you can see big picture. And usually those that do well on that model have many years of not doing that model that has gotten them, whether it's, a different sport or a long-term approach or a volume approach or, even powerlifting or CrossFit background. Like those are all good foundational things that you have developed, even though it's not weightlifting specific.
You see so many athletes who come from lots of different backgrounds, especially even if you're pulling from a lot of Florida high school weightlifting, where each school is using a different programming approach. What are the three biggest mistakes athletes are making in their programming before they come to Lindenwood?
The biggest one I would probably say is them just not being realistic with themselves about what they're capable of that day. You know, if it's not going to be the best day of your life every single day, so you need to recalibrate to be real with where you are for that day. You know, everybody wants to lift massive weights over their head, but if it's not going to happen that day, you can't put a round peg in a square hole.
Absolutely. Oh, I see that all the time. That's something I see a lot with young lifters is they just kind of assume that every single session that they do is going to be the best training session of their entire life. And that completely blows my mind. I don't know who's feeding that into them.
You know, honestly, on that, I would probably say it's the social media era. And all the top weightlifters are always going to post like these big grand movements that they do, but what people don't see is everything they're doing behind the camera lens. And I think it's because, you know, not many people, some do, but not many people are going to focus on the last 7 days of my training block have been terrible. So I'm going to show that. They're going to post that day 8 that has been awesome. So a lot of what they're absorbing is through the lens of what is on social media as to what, well, these athletes are hitting good days left and right. Why can't I? And in all actuality, they're not.
Yeah. Yeah. In all actuality, especially if you've ever coached anybody who's like a high level athlete, you know that they're having like a good day and that's the one that they post. But then like the day before, they were having a full meltdown.
I say this all the time, but shockingly, social media is fake. It,
You
it
might be surprised to hear this. All right, so let's go programming mistake number 2 that you're seeing from athletes.
I would say, and we've hit a little bit on this, but being too focused on only their top sets or their working sets. So let's say I have a 3x2 at 80 to 85%. Usually beginning athletes are just trying to get to those parameters and see how they do. You know, it's kind of like a pie in the sky, you know, just hopefully I'm going to be able to do it and pull and pray and hopefully I get there. But how you get to those working sets or those top sets really dictate on whether that's going to be a good or a bad day. I see a lot of younger lifters. Let's say my prescribed weight is 120 for whatever movement. I might go bar 50, 80, 100, 120. Well, you've only done 5 warm-up sets and you've left a lot of kilos on that bar to kind of see where you are for that day. So you've just like put all your eggs in this basket that it's going to be the best day of your life when you didn't really take your time to work out the kinks, and you might have missed a good day of training because you took that approach versus being there and kind of doing a systems check as you warm up. So if you're taking the day for what it is and you take time to fix things early on, it's a lot easier when you fix stuff at 40% versus at 92%.
What is a systems check?
So if I have somebody that can't get their split down right in their feet with their snatch, you know, they don't like to get to their toes, and they don't like to move their feet out, or one foot moves and the other one doesn't move, like I might program, I don't know, a no foot snatch so that they can find their balance as to where they are in their feet. You can do no feet snatch from the start or the catch position, but you get direct feedback on whether you're moving forward or backwards with a no feet. So I might program, I want to do a systems check with no feet for you because you have these issues. But a systems check is also like a mindset approach as you're constantly like saying like, what is going on with my movement for today? Why is this not going as well? And I need to be real with myself about what I'm messing up on to then see if I can do a variation or a lighter movement to fix it before I jump to new weight.
Or even just another set. I feel like I see athletes all the time be like, I've got to hit like you were saying 100 for my 3x2, so I'm going to go 50, 80, 100 and call it a day. When really you might need to do 50 and you're like, "Oh, that was rough. Let me do 50 2, 3, 4 more times until it starts feeling good before you start
Yeah.
building up."
And that's kind of what I was saying about like the programming or the philosophy approach. Like I'm not going to program for you to take 53 times because I don't know where you are on that day where we might just have to take 40% 3 times. That's not going to fatigue you at all. But you're going to take longer to dial in that movement So you set yourself up to be the best you when you get to that top set or that working set. You're trying to get all your stars aligned to be the best you when you get there. You're not just hoping and praying that all avenues of your practice up to that top set is going to be there. Like, you make sure they're in line before you get to your top set. You That's kind of ways you learn to earn the ability to do heavier weight versus just hoping that you magically arrive there.
Got it. So just focusing, too much on the top set and not on the sets that will lead to that. And I think that's also something that a skill that a lot of lifters don't necessarily have, that they need to practice, is not just locking in for the big lifts, but practicing focus as a technique itself.
My kids say locking in all the time, and it drives me like, oh, I'm locked in. I'm gonna hit a 20 kilo PR, and talk is cheap until you actually do it. You can be all locked in that you wanted to, but you still got to do it.
Yeah. All right, so let's go into mistake number 3 that athletes are making in their programming before they join Lindenwood.
Accessories, not doing them or not taking them seriously. I like to do certain time sets for like accessories. One, because people like to do a set and then sit on their phone for 4 minutes and then finally pick up the weight again and do another set. But if you adhere to like a time restriction, that depending on how heavy I want you pushing accessories, I might say, let's say I want you in a volume cycle and I don't want you pushing heavy weight. I'm only going to give you 20 seconds rest. Where if you're unable to recover enough to do that weight for the prescribed sets, then you're too heavy. Some people skip accessories completely. Accessories are kind of like the sprinkles on top when you're making like a cupcake. Like, it's not going to make the cupcake, but it's going to make it way better if you had the sprinkles versus not having the sprinkles. And it's vital for injury prevention. So it's not a big piece of the puzzle when it comes to getting snatch and clean and jerk better short term, but long term it opens up new avenues for you to unlock bigger weight because you're prepped to be able to handle that load overhead.
What are the accessories that you think more people need to consider?
I would say the first one is the ones you're the worst at. The ones that you've avoided because you're not very good at. But taking that one step further is a lot of people in weightlifting put a lot of emphasis on lower body, but I think they just kind of write off upper body stuff. And if some coaches and programs are like anti bench press. I mean, I'm not anti bench press at all. We bench press a lot. I wouldn't say it's the main thing, but I would say an accessory of a bench press is still important to build raw upper body strength. There's not a stronger upper body movement than a barbell bench press. So, in us being in a sport that relies on load on our skeletal system and on our body, I think it's dumb not to include bench press. Is it going to make you better at snatching and clean and jerk directly? No, but it's probably going to get you stronger upper body so you can hold more weight. You look at older weightlifters, like kind of the old school model, and they had this massive upper body and ginormous, huge shoulders, traps up to their ears kind of thing. And you don't see that as much anymore because everybody's worried about lower body stuff. But they also forget that every lift in weightlifting ends with you putting it over your head. So it's kind of important that you also need to learn how to hold weight over your head or just hold weight above the waist.
That's such a good point. I mean, upper body strength, it seems like it used to be much more of a priority in old school weightlifters. And it doesn't seem like I feel like I don't see weightlifters post their strict press ever,
Yeah.
or their bench press or anything related to their upper body strength.
Yeah. And I don't know, I don't really know why that trend has kind of changed, but that's definitely one of the trends that I've kind of seen as far as lower body being the main piece of the puzzle, and people just kind of write off the accessories of the upper body. Training trunk is also vital. Learning how to brace and training stabilization through your trunk is something that I think is getting a little more popular, but I think people should make it more of a priority.
One thing I realized a few years ago as a burnt out weightlifter is that there's no rules for how a weightlifting program is supposed to look. You don't have to push through heavy snatches and clean and jerks on a daily basis, especially if this is a hobby for you. That's when I made the switch to OlyBuilding, a style of training with a true 50-50 balance between Olympic lifting and bodybuilding. Not just a few sets of some accessory work that is, let's be honest, lazily picked at the end of the workout. So if you want to focus more on building muscle without losing your Olympic lifts, then check out the 8-week OlyBuilding program linked in the description below. And you can save 20% at checkout when you use the discount code LASTSETPOD. All right, back to the show.
All right, so we've covered kind of the programming approach. Let's cover some technique stuff because, athletes, technique is such a big aspect of the sport. So with all of the athletes coming from vastly different backgrounds joining the team, what are the biggest technique problems that you're seeing? Let's go top 3 technique issues you're seeing in new recruits when they join the team.
Okay, so top 3, I would say, for the snatch specifically, I would say is probably not being patient to the hips with the bar for the snatch. A lot of people when they pass the knees like to either round the knees where their toes come up and go to the bar rather than standing up and pulling the bar in. You should be over the bar all the way until the bar is all the way to your hip before you kind of open up at the top. And I see people will get past their knees and they'll already kind of shift forward as to where their hips are going forward and their chest is getting behind versus kind of covering the bar as they get to the hips. Another one I would probably say is going to their toes too early, which is kind of symbiotic to like their hips pushing forward, but you'll see, in the slow motion movements of when the bar kind of passes their knees that when they still need to be whole foot, still majority of their pressure being towards the front, but when they round their knees, their heels start coming up too soon. And I mean, it's just it's simple that it's harder to push the floor away when all of your weight is going forward versus all of your weight going vertical when like you do in the start when your whole foot stays down. You also have more stability also when you're pushing the floor away whole foot versus just pushing on your toes.
Yeah, and you'll get more bar height too.
A lot more bar height. Yeah, you wait for your toes until you get all the way to your hips and you cover the bar all the way up.
That makes sense. All right, what's your third one?
Just simply how you start, your starting position. I think people think that the most important part is, which is, you know, has some merit and some truth to it, is when you round the knees getting into your hip. That's where majority of the velocity comes. But I can tell when somebody's going to make or miss a lift based on how they set up and how they start. Or even if they do make it, it's not going to be pretty because you can see how they initiate the movement off the ground, where their chests and where their hips are, which one rises first. Are they pull forward? Are they pulling with their back more than their legs? So I think being real methodical about making your start position the same every single time is something that I see kids coming in. It's a little bit different every time, and it's not as like consistently the same.
Yeah, oh, dude, I see that all the time. Especially like athletes doing like a rolling start. Dude, that drives me insane.
Yeah, me too.
But the roll start, a dynamic start, a lot of pumps of the hips, just things like that, where athletes think that they're going to get more out of it. They tend to be just getting less. So do you guys normally teach like a static start?
No, I would say it would be very dependent on that athlete. I would say if I had somebody coming in that was a beginner or learning, I think you get more direct feedback with a static start because there's less moving components. In a dynamic start, people are moving their hips or kind of adjusting their feet. There's more gears to the equation for potential to go wrong. Where a static start, if it's not for you, there may be some kilos left on the bar because you don't get to load your hips. But also when you're a beginner, I really don't care about what weight you're moving. I worry about you maintaining position on the push. I'm not one way or the other per se, but once you get to a higher level, we kind of decide on which one you're better at. And at different phases of the season, if you're used to dynamic starting and we're 3 weeks out of a competition, I'm not going to change you then. but it might highlight that you're struggling with your dynamic start. So after competition, we might go back to static.
Okay, so let's go over now. I mean, we could talk about the clean a little bit. I know that you mentioned that the snatch and the clean, a lot of those issues tend to be very similar. Is there anything that you see in the clean that you want to go over here?
With the clean, kind of like we talked about earlier, it's usually a lot of the same as a snatch, not being patient with the hips, going to their toes too early, and, kind of the start position. I would say the biggest thing with the clean that it is not really a technical thing, but it's kind of a mindset thing. A clean off the floor is going to be heavy. It's once you get to a heavier, higher percentage weight, it's going to be heavy. And I think when people get to that new realm of feeling it off the ground and going, oh man, I'm not sure if I can get this, and they start getting self doubt. But as you actually get the bar closer to your hips, your mechanical advantage makes it lighter. So I say this to people like once I know that they've kind of taken that tick to where this weight is going to be heavy for them, they can't just rip it off the ground. I remind them that it's going to be heavy off the ground. Be ready for it and stay with it and still keep it moving as fast as you can with your ability to hold positions.
What are the biggest things that you see in the jerk? I'm curious on this because, in my opinion, I think that the jerk is probably the hardest of the lifts to master. I'm curious to know if what your thoughts are there.
I agree. I think the jerk is the most technical. Um, followed closely by the snatch, but there's especially if you're a split jerk, I think split jerk is has the most potential to move the most weight overall. And I think like the timing of your feet and where your hips are in relationships to your feet, as well as where the weight is in your feet on that split. Footwork and the catch is really big. There's a lot of moving components to the jerk. And I think it's important that the jerk can really be sectioned off more than the other two movements. You hear a lot of people talk about high block snatches, or, we'll talk about, low block snatches, or no contact, no hook, no feet kind of snatches. But a lot of people don't really dive in to the deeper aspects of the jerk of doing a push jerk or a power jerk, or like a jerk already in the split or a step through jerk that I think people just kind of write off the jerk as like, oh, well, I've cleaned it. Let's see if I can do it. When in all actuality, like your jerk should be heavier than your clean if you're just going from the blocks. And then if you're doing like a total day, you got to clean it up first. So now you're tired and doing a movement that should be heavier. It's it's snatch and clean and jerk, and the jerk always comes after the clean. So you have to be more technical when you're heavy because you're tired. So just general footwork is mostly what I notice as far as on the dip, on the drive, and on the catch. Dip's got to be smooth, and you can't on the way down. You can't be dipping and changing positions. The more your hips and your shoulder angles change on the way down and up, that bar is falling, and the bar is zigzagging versus staying vertical down and up. And I think that holding the position and making it smooth through the dip and powerful through the drive is something I don't see very often when recruits are coming to Lindenwood.
That makes a ton of sense. I see kind of the same thing, especially with all the high school lifters that I see. Is just general lack of awareness of where they're supposed to be in the bottom of the dip, and then just inconsistent split footwork, probably because of inconsistent dip and drive.
Your snatch and your cleans, people typically have the approach that they should be the same, but people on the jerk don't take that same approach with the jerk. Because I've seen high level weightlifters that will do multiple jerks in a row, and every single one of their jerks look different. And it's like, yeah, okay, you shocked the box and you completed the rep, but if you look back at your videos, all 20 of these jerks are different because there's you need to get them more the same than different. And just because you get an overhead with locked elbows at a meet when you're going for a PR, that's one thing, but when you're practicing, people forget to practice the jerk. Like just like they're practicing the snatch and the clean, you need to make the movement be repeatable as many times as possible, regardless of the weight.
I think that the reason that happens a lot in the jerk in particular is because the jerk, this especially the split jerk, has a ton of room for error. And that's the reason that people do the split jerk. It's got the highest room for error while also still having the highest potential of getting the most weight over your head.
Yeah.
And so people can get away with a lot more in the jerk than they can in the snatch, where you have very little room for error, right? So people are much more intentional about their snatches because they have to be, and they can get away with a lot more jerks because there's more room for error for them. But that's not going to help you get to that top end level where you still need as much practice in the jerk, despite the fact that you can get away with more there.
Yeah, I think that kind of highlights kind of a programming thing too, because kind of like we talked about doing total days. Anytime you do a total day, you snatch first and you're exhausted doing technical work from the snatch. Then you get to the clean, that's, the most rugged of all the movements. And now you got a jerk, but you've already been in the weight room for 2.5 hours. And now you're like, oh, now I got to do the most technical movement of all three of the lifts, and I'm already tired. So I think that kind of, it shows like it shines a little bit of light and shows a little bit of merit to doing it on a separate day where you might just do jerk work, and that might be your only main movement that you do. Of course, depending on where you are in your season, but most people, when you're doing total days, the jerk is the last component that you're working on when you're already tired and wore out. So I think highlighting specific technical work on the jerk is something that might be missing in a lot of programs.
Absolutely. But let's talk a little bit more big picture stuff. I'm curious to hear some of your thoughts on these. So you've been in the sport for kind of a long time, an old man, some might say. What are the biggest changes that you've seen in the sport since you started, and what trends are you hoping we'll continue to see?
Real quick, I do want to highlight that I told some of our freshmen last year that Coach was turning 62 on his birthday, and they believed me.
Come on, like really, like 62?
How old are you, and when did you get in the sport?
I'm 83. Let's be honest. No. Uh, no. So I got into sport in like 2010, and I'm gonna turn 39. So I'm not actually 62, guys. Don't believe anything this guy says.
But yeah, a little more about what you saw change from that time in 2010. What was weightlifting like at Lindenwood? Big picture, in USAW, and then how are things now?
And me and Brian kind of talked a little bit about this, but like in kind of the early days, 2010, 2011, 2012, even all the way up to 2015, uh everybody was kind of lost. I feel like they're, social, shockingly, guys, if you're under the age of 25, social media was not a thing back then. Posting videos for everybody to see or training logs was not a thing. Like we never recorded ourselves and put it on anything. There was occasional forums, but there wasn't even Reddit. There wasn't anything like that where you could seek information for Olympic weightlifting specific. So I think it was kind of like the Wild West. I think people were kind of shooting in the dark to try to find like the secret as to what was going to make us better. And honestly, I mean, Olympic style weightlifting wasn't really that big in 2010, 2009, 2000. You internationally it was big, but there wasn't anything, there was no place to go where you could find that information. So I think it was a bunch of individuals, throwing something at the wall and seeing if it sticks. And there was only a couple things, you could go to Catalyst or you could go to MDUSA, and you could kind of get some ideas about what they were doing, but it definitely wasn't as in depth as it is now. I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to go now, and people that have been in the sport long enough that can, tutelage people and show people like this is where it was. This took 20 years for me to figure out. Hopefully I can tell you this and you can figure it out in 6 months. So it's way more guided now with legitimate parameters of what is good and what is bad and the gray areas versus, back in my day, as they say, yeah, back in Calvin's day.
Yeah.
there were no parameters. It was like the Wild West. Like literally, people were just trying to figure out how to get better at snatch and clean and jerk. And at that time, that's all we did because that's what we thought the sport was.
We're doing approaches like squat every day or
Yeah.
kind of like Russian squat program, small up squat. Like, is this the key? Let's figure it out. Let's try it, right?
Yeah, and there wasn't anybody to like pull us aside and say, "No, you're an idiot. That's dumb. You're not going to do that." It was just, let's try it and see how it works.
Did you ever do squat every day?
We never did. No, we were actually on a polar opposite program where it was more snatch and clean and jerk every day.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
sounds about
and
right. I got into it right at the time where squat every day got real popular. I definitely got roped in pretty easily into that one. I was like, oh, you can do this one thing that's like kind of easier than everything else all the time. That sounds great.
yeah, I'm broken from training that way, so I really don't want my athletes to make the same mistake I did because it catches up to you when you're old.
Yeah, absolutely. I broke my body so you guys don't have to. One kind of thing that we've talked about on the podcast at one point, it was it seemed like a contentious topic for a lot of people. We talked about the junior to senior drop off in USA weightlifting. In my opinion, I think it's probably one of the biggest problems in the sport that is preventing us from being dominant in global weightlifting, especially as a clean sport. Um, how do you think that we can solve this problem where athletes are, getting into the sport as a youth and a junior, and then they're doing really well. They probably have a decent amount of success. They're going to nationals, maybe they're making some teams, but then they become a senior, and then it seems like just everything falls apart right after that point. How do we fix that?
That's a good question. I would say, uh, honestly, I think the role that I'm in, as far as being at a university at a college level, is a pretty good transition for that because it kind of opens up a new category from people going from youth to junior, and then all of a sudden junior seniors they're kind of lost. The typical college athlete, I think, straddles the junior and senior line, it depending on when they start college. I might have some people that are 18, but I also might have some people that are 25 on my team. And that's kind of in that straddle effect when you transition from juniors into the senior category. And I think, you know, at the college level, I think that's a good transitioning from people going from that level to seniors because like I said, I'm hoping to set my athletes up to be the best senior athlete as they can be by the time they get out of college. So I mean, I would love to see kind of more focus to be put on, collegiate weightlifting. I think masters really has their day, youth and junior and seniors really have their day, but university weightlifting, college weightlifting has always been kind of a side quest where it's like optional on whether you do it or whether it's not. I'm not saying that everybody's got to go to college, but I think I think there's some benefit to highlighting that, college weightlifting is a real opportunity to kind of get people that would segue them good into going and being a successful senior lifter.
And it makes sense because I think it's a good. I think people think that when you get to that junior to senior transition, you can either, decide to go down the college weightlifting route, or you can go down the route of becoming a really good senior athlete. And they treat them as if they're separate things. When in reality, I think that especially when you have a long-term approach like what you guys are talking about at Lindenwood, you can go and you step in to be a junior athlete and be fully developed so that by the time that you leave Lindenwood, you are actually a better senior athlete than if you were just trying to, be a junior athlete and then try and make the leap into senior.
Yeah, it's almost like a stepping stone, it's a good transition to that next level versus just making the jump and hoping that you arrive there and can be and to rise to the challenge of what a senior level lifter requires.
I think something that we're noticing happening on the Lindenwood team this last year and this next coming year is that some of the juniors on our team to even make our Lindenwood University nationals team are going to have to be hitting junior world B standards to even be considered to go to nationals for us. And so it kind of lines up pretty well with that too, because we're going to push some of these kids, maybe, excuse me, maybe a lot harder, because they really have this social pressure to make this team, the university national team. All their friends, all their teammates are want to go. And that's a lot stronger social pressure than looking on Instagram and seeing Team USA and being like, yeah, I mean, that looks cool. Like, I want to do that. Like, so that's a cool part of it, where we can almost get people to that junior level too, where they're going to compete. If they're 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds coming in their first or second year and they're already really good, we can get them really good at that junior level, and then have those next 2 years where we transition them into the senior level and really get them ready for, if they're willing to take on that challenge to taking it to the next step.
Yeah, and kind of adding on that, I think, with the competitive success of our team, if people want to rise that new senior level, they first have to rise to that new level at the universities level that we've kind of created on our team and in our environment. Because, kind of it it's almost looking like it's going to be easier to qualify for AO finals this year, or virus finals, whatever they're calling it, than it is to go to university nationals for us, because the people that are coming on our team are ready to already start transitioning to that senior level, where it's a higher standard to then make that jump even to the senior level. And if they're able to make the jump and make the university team on our team, they're probably set up pretty good to make the jump to the senior level during or after they leave Lindenwood.
I'm curious to know how you kind of approach your strategy, big picture, when it comes to selecting your athletes. Because one thing I've noticed is that it seems like some of these newer teams that are coming out seem to be really focused on recruiting, like finding the best lifters, numbers wise, to join their team. And they're kind of thinking that maybe that'll help them get on that podium at university nationals or whatever meet that they're doing. Where I don't think that it seemed like you guys were really approaching it with that way over the last few years. I mean, now it seems like that's a little bit different, right? You've got two pretty big name recruits coming in, Ella Nicholson and George Upmeyer. Are you finding? I'm curious to know if this is your approach. Are you going about this as, we're going to find a system and develop a program that is going to develop athletes to be their best, and then we're going to show the results of that, and it's going to attract better lifters who want to come join our team? Is that kind of the approach that you guys are going with, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I would say that that's pretty spot on, as far as like we're trying to foster like an environment to showing people that we have a system that kind of unlocks their true potential for like the next level. And kind of strategy when it comes to picking athletes. Like I I'm way more quality over quantity. I don't necessarily have to have a specific numbers of athletes that I have to have on my team. When I'm recruiting those athletes, it's are they going to aid in my culture and raise the level of potential that we have in our program, and kind of help me generate getting to the next level of trying to make it better every single year. Because if I'm just going to take somebody on for a number, I'm going to wind up working against that person, spending all my time trying to get them on board, versus somebody who's already like hitting the ground running and ready to go, and opening to aiding in our culture. That's the person that I want. It could be 10, it could be 2 people, but I'm looking for the people that are going to help me foster the right environment that I want and believe in, to get my whole team to the next level.
What do you think college weightlifting looks like in 5 years and 10 years from now?
I really think we're going to see a lot of growth and a lot of hyper focus on college weightlifting. Um, every year there are schools coming out all over the country that are, highlighting that you can go to college for weightlifting and get, pretty good scholarships. Different kind of areas of the country, take Florida, for example, or Minnesota, or, West Coast. Like, there are a lot of school sponsored programs that, around where we are in Missouri, there's not really any school sponsored programs. It all comes from club teams, but it's giving younger athletes access to learning what weightlifting is, which then already preps them to be better by the time that they get to me, thus increasing their potential in the sport and showing bigger numbers coming out of college teams. I mean, just the sheer members that are, in USAW from 15, 20, 10 years ago is astronomical. And a lot of those are youth and junior and senior level lifters. It's kind of an era of, I feel like the younger kids are really getting involved earlier, which really highlights the growth of college programs. I think in all states, those that I mentioned are kind of hubs that I talk to, but I think we could see it grow in states that I've never recruited from before just because of, the increased attention as to what Olympic weightlifting actually is.
Absolutely. I think that kind of falls in line with the inflection points that I've seen in USA weightlifting since starting. And I think that most people would probably agree USA weightlifting had pretty two big moments. The first one was when CrossFit got really popular. Weightlifting as a sport would probably not exist in the United States without CrossFit having gotten so popular that so many people were suddenly doing the Olympic lifts. And you saw that jump in membership probably from 2012 to 2015 is such a good example of that. And then another inflection point, and I think is happening right now, is the rise of high school weightlifting as a sport, especially here in Florida. Maybe I just feel it more, but it seems like with so many people that are getting so excited about weightlifting at such a young age as a thing that they are doing every single day, I can't imagine any world where this many high school athletes who need a place to go isn't going to lead to more college teams popping up and hopefully more scholarship programs. And hopefully that's going to lead to just the overall rise of how good college weightlifting programs are and prove that you can actually not just go to college weightlifting because it's a way to get a college scholarship, but go to college weightlifting as a way to set you up for more success as a senior athlete and hopefully on the Olympic teams.
Yeah, I think we're still kind of paving the way and kind of, paving that road to, 5, 10 years from now. It's going to be a pretty well established road as to what people can actually achieve through college weightlifting. So I'm really excited to especially see what the next 5, 10 years look like because there's a lot more attention to weightlifting than there's ever been since I've been in the sport. And every year it surprises me more and more.
This year alone, going into University Nationals 2026, we just got moved venues. So University Nationals has been at the Arnold for what, over 10 years. And now we got moved to being alongside Masters Nationals, which is going to flip flop east and west every year. This coming year, it's in Salt Lake City, and it's mid to end of April, I believe.
Yeah.
So a lot closer to the end of the school year for us. And it's alongside Masters Nationals. So I think because of that, without the buzz and hubbub of the Arnold going on, as well as AO1, kind of being on the same venue floor, the same ballroom as the sort of the main event. I think I could almost see universities becoming the main event between those two, between Masters and University Nationals. I think this is a big step by the USAW people to kind of help us, specifically there. What they told me was that this expands the athlete cap by quite a bit. So we're maxed out at the Arnold. As many athletes as we can possibly fit in University Nationals. So we can get more athletes competing at the university level every year. And then it's also, like lines up with the school year a little better, and they can kind of put a little more attention towards it, whether it's media attention or kind of it just being our own event in a way. So I think that's going to lead to some really cool stuff over the next few years with University Nationals being with Masters Nationals, kind of being its own meet in that way. At least probably I would say at least equal importance to the Masters Nationals running at that time. And so that's something I'm really excited for. I think there's a lot more pros than cons. Obviously, it's a little more of a financial challenge. We could at Lindenwood drive to the Arnold, and now we're gonna have to take flights to Salt Lake City or wherever this competition may be in future years. So that might be some uncertainty, but I think that the pros definitely outweigh the cons as far as growth of the sport long term, which is kind of everyone's goal in college weightlifting. It seems like everybody wants to grow it. Everybody wants to grow the college side of things. Even USA Weightlifting has shown some interest, which people kind of had an impression in the past. Oh, they don't care about college lifting. They don't care about anything. They put us in the back of the hallway at the Arnold. We're just an afterthought. But it seems like that's maybe flipping a little bit. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I think the past couple of years is just seeing like the energy that college teams are bringing because they're a rowdy crowd, man. They're fun to watch, and I think that they realize that there's a lot of fans for college sports. Like, why would weightlifting be any different? And I think that energy has kind of unlocked new avenues for college weightlifting to kind of be its own thing. Like
Yeah.
Cal was saying, like it's almost becoming not a side quest like it used to be, but kind of the main event.
For a while, I think the university title or winning university nationals was viewed as much lesser than winning, for instance, a youth or junior national title. But I think we're going to see that flip. I think we're going to see the university title being a little more coveted than perhaps even a junior national champion title. That might be even more competitive. I mean, we think about it, it's between 18 and 25 students that are in college. That's university nationals. I think it should be more competitive and it should be more valuable because in the end of the day, these national championships, there's 150 plus national champions coming out of nationals week in the summer. How much importance are we placing on each of those? Well, this next year there's only going to be 16 university national champions compared to the 150 through all different age groups and weight classes coming out of nationals, like I said. And so I think we could potentially see, people place a lot more meaning. You can see it in the cheering. You can see it in the posting about the meets, what people say, kind of the vibes going into that, the stories that go into those winning stories. We had a great one this past year. We had an athlete, really clutch up, and we won by just 1 point. It was a 246 to 245 points scored as a team, and that's such an amazing story that you're not gonna see in another part of weightlifting. So I think people are starting to realize that we're kind of getting more eyes on it, and it's just gonna exponentially grow from here on out.
And I think that the team element that you guys are talking about, I hadn't even really kind of thought about this before, but you're right. Watching university nationals, like you have your whole team there cheering for the one athlete who's competing. Where in pretty much every other aspect of weightlifting, it's kind of an individual sport, and you've got like other teammates, but really they're not like teammates. They're just other people that your coach coaches a lot of the time. And I think that we're seeing the team element of it might be exactly what the spectatorship that people talk about like is the biggest problem. How do we get more people to watch weightlifting? Well, I think team element might be a big factor in that, right? It's a lot easier to have an exciting audience spectatorship when it's one team versus another, or when it's three teams versus another, right? As opposed to 20 individuals all against each other, right? It's hard to know who to root for, where you can kind of pick a side almost with the teams. And I bet we'll be willing to see that we'll start seeing people who are fans of some college teams in weightlifting who have never gone to that college and don't know anybody that goes to that college, but they just like that team, kind of like we see in other sports.
Yeah, I think, you look at any other sport and it's, the Bulls versus the Pistons or whatever, or it's, the Red Sox versus the Cardinals kind of thing. And I think it's instead of a bunch of individuals competing as individuals, now we're kind of entering the new realms of teams versus teams, like you said, and that creates a lot of energy. And let's be honest, if you don't know what weightlifting is, weightlifting's kind of boring to watch. Let's be honest. If
Mhm.
you're just kind of by, you're like, ah, cool. People putting weight overhead, like, but if you get a team aspect to it and you see like the rivalry between teams and scoring ultimate points, I mean, that's like all the other sports that we see that are, really popular here in the U.S. Even wrestling's an individual sport, but they still have team points that they're competing against the other team. So
Mhm.
it would kind of make sense that we could see that model really kind of growing the sport of weightlifting.
Do you think that we'll with maybe a growth in the team aspect of weightlifting and probably college weightlifting, do you think that we'll see a format change to the sport for college weightlifting? Like for example, every other college sport we're going to see matches leading up to the big championship. Right now, everybody just qualifies athletes for nationals, and then everybody meets together for the first time at the university national championships. Do you think that we'll see format changes to how college weightlifting is done, where there's maybe a bracket system or a championship system to find out who are the two teams that are going to go to the championships?
I don't know. That's interesting because, wrestling kind of does they'll do like dual meets against teams versus teams, when they travel to one team's location and compete with them there to kind of, not really size each other up, but to kind of have some like interleague play before like the big like event kind of thing. So I would like it to go that way. And I think there's been some talks in the past couple of years of, I think that was like the whole idea behind the NUQ or the National University Qualifiers, so that teams could get together to be able to compete against one another and not only qualify, but to promote college interleague play, whatever you want to call it kind of thing. And I think it would be cool. I just know the hardest part, since I was on the ground floor of kind of experiencing that, is just finding a way to fun to get there is the hardest part, because when you have teams, you have more people, and it's not bringing three people. I'm bringing a team of 42 athletes like that. It's a lot of money to be able to do like a duels meet. So I think if there was some reason to do it, and if it would be kind of a stepping stone or part of the equation, I think it would be really cool, because then, like you said, you might have people show up that are just supporters of Lindenwood that have never even been to Lindenwood, but they like our team. So it might promote a little more team play versus just individual weightlifters. That could be cool. I don't know. I never thought about that.
I think the best opportunity is just offering like some university awards at AO finals specifically, uh, and potentially at summer nationals as well. I think that would be just a great way to go about it. That wouldn't cost any extra money. Most college athletes or college weightlifters are going to those two meets as well, especially the good ones. So that's something I could see. It's nice to compete against maybe all the big dogs as a university team. That's kind of a cool like goal we have. Maybe for this next year or the year after that, is to win against some of the big name teams at finals. But most people don't even know that there's team competition at finals.
University system has been pretty good as far as putting teams against one another. But if you get outside of college teams, nobody really signs up for teams for nationals or AO finals. Like there's never been a reason for other senior level teams to go head to head, because it didn't really mean anything. So I think that's kind of what he's pointing at, as far as like some kind of a system where you're bringing other teams together even outside of the college world, could even further promote teams against team, and dog for dog, who's going to be the highest ranked team in the nation. Like that would be really cool.
Yeah, I'd love to see like a team of 5 at finals, scoring team of 5 at finals, and then a scoring team of 8 at the university national championships.
Ooh.
So that could be cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that honestly, all we need is just a big trophy. I think we need a Stanley Cup for weightlifting. And I think that if we had something like that, that might solve all those problems, because people need a reason. Like, what am I working for if I don't have a big trophy to win that I can take home with me? I think the Stanley Cup, they got it figured out,
Yeah, give each athlete like a week with the trophy so they can take it to their hometown, just like the Stanley Cup does,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that'd be motivation.
The Florida high schools would love that, dude. Oh my god! You bring it back to your high school, let all the kids touch it.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Yeah, to drink water or whatever out of the bowl like they do the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I think we just solved college weightlifting. We need a Stanley Cup. That's what we need. I think on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap it there. Calvin, where can people find you?
At Calvin Lackey, 81 kg on everything.
And Trent, where can people find more about Lindenwood Weightlifting?
Yeah, it's just at Lindenwood Weightlifting. You can feel free to email me too. It's just tcrane@lindenwood.edu.
All right. And you guys can find me at Big Ben Strength everywhere. Make sure to check out our programs and coaching down in the description below. We'll catch you guys next week. Bye.
If you found this video helpful, then make sure to check out this video here, or this episode of the Last Set, Best Set podcast.